Sack culture continues in the Premier League as Marinakis pulls the trigger on Ange just moments after defeat to Chelsea. And already we have seen some candidates lined up for the role. Today we're going to debate it. Why Ange was sacked? Is 8 games too short of a time to actually have an impact? And more importantly, is the prime contender Sean Dyche going to be the right fit for Forest moving forward? Let's get things kicked off straight away. We've got to start with the obvious point, right? 8 Premier League games or 8 games total. How on earth is a manager supposed to do anything in that time? I mean, Jamie, we'll come to you first. What's your thoughts on the Ange sacking first and foremost?
To be honest, I think you have to go back to the Ange appointment. I thought the appointment was a bit of a silly one because it's more well, not even Ange being the pointless one, the sort of silly one. It's more sacking Nuno was the silly one. I understand that they had arguments with it, but you got to remember where Forest have been to scraping over sort of relegation to getting them into European football. I know sort of some people would say, they probably should have got top four, but that shows how well they did that season. To then sack him and then go with another manager who's got a different play style and changing a big play style for a club that's, it's not, you're not, they're a little bit of a cemented Premier League team, but not that cemented. You're not talking about a team who's been in there for, even 5+ years. So that's where I think it's a bit silly of the whole get bringing in Ange. But Ange, look, we're in a results business. There's so much money going up, and like I said, they're not cemented in the Premier League. You lose so much money going down. If you're not performing, you've got to go, and the fans had already turned. If the fan, I know you said it's in a short amount of time, but if the fans are normally they'll back your manager for a little bit, then they'll start getting annoyed. The fans turned so quickly, and I think that says everything. And bringing in and I just didn't understand it. The only thing that made me sort of go, okay, is they're trying to win the Europa League, and they've brought in the last manager to do it. But that really cost them in the league. Spurs came 17th, and it's Spurs. Spurs are a cemented Premier League team. It was baffling, I think. So the fact that he got sacked this early doesn't surprise me. I think the owner has got a bit like a god complex in a way, and it's just a bit madness from him. And he will sack the next manager. I think Sean Dyche is basically confirmed. He will be sacked, and it's not if, it's when, and that's the biggest problem you've got with him.
Yeah, it does make a mockery of things. I feel like Marinakis has probably got a nice portrait of Roman Abramovich on his wall somewhere, taking
He
inspiration. I
only
mean,
has
this
a
is
portrait of himself, Jordan. He's not going to have a picture. He's not going to have one of anyone else. I know
yeah.
I know what you're referring to, but it's a picture of him and only him.
Yeah. And look, I do agree with you, right? The appointment of Ange didn't really make sense. You know, the maybe the evidence and the takeaway from this is that Ange is just a terrible league manager and he's a cup manager, which is fine, but maybe that is the takeaway. But for me, I look at it more a little bit defensive of Ange in the sense that how is a manager supposed to come into an environment like that where you've only got 8 games to succeed? The fans basically hate you from minute one because you lose a few games. It's just a recipe for disaster. And we've seen this, this is a bit of a wider issue and a wider debate with Russell Martin at Rangers. Exactly the same scenario, barely given a chance, fans turning him from basically minute one. And it's just such a toxic environment. You've got no chance of success. And I get what you're saying. Like, yes, ultimately, if we look at the league table right now, they are in the relegation zone. This is a team who we argued could push, for Champions League spot. So it is a tough time for Forest, but no manager can do anything in 8 games. And if they do, it's not tactics. It's a new manager bounce, and to some degree, it's luck. And I think this is a bit of a dangerous precedent moving forward. Personally, Reese, what's your thoughts around this sacking?
Yeah, I mean, in a world where we all say we want patience and it takes time to build things, the reality is it is a results game. And when other teams are chopping and changing frequently, you probably have to do the same because it's much easier to hit the panic button. A 0% win record at Forest for Ange is not good enough, regardless of how many games it was. You have to consider some of the games that they played. You can't really look too much into losing 3-0 away at Arsenal, but, to be 2-0 up at Swansea in the Cup and lose 3-2 in the manner they did, that was unacceptable. Losing at home to Sunderland, regardless of how well Sunderland are doing, isn't acceptable. Holding out against Chelsea until half time before capitulating really quickly isn't acceptable. And then they put in a credible performance against Betis in the Europa League, but no disrespect to Midtjylland, but they should be beating Midtjylland at home, and they did not. I do like Andrew. I do think he's a good coach, and I think the Europa League win was testament to the success he's built as a manager. However, I think the rot from the Premier League form last year has not gone away, and this has continued. And you appoint a manager with a completely different style of play now, it takes a lot of time for the players to get used to that. And a lot of those players are not that style of play. They are Nuno's style of play. So it wasn't really going to work overnight. This is something that had to have been done during the summer. This isn't, you know, I like Marinakis as an owner. I think he said he was there to take Forest into Europe and he's backed that up. And therefore he wants, that ambition to be matched. Ange was that kind of guy to do that, but it hasn't worked. Now he's got to look somewhere else. I think the big factor for Nottingham Forest in this decision is the fact that for the first time in a long time, the three promoted teams to the Premier League seem to have got their act together. They might not have been so trigger happy last year. Instead, this year, they're already 9 points behind Sunderland. You know, all three teams look in much better shape, look much more able to stay up than we've seen in a very long time. So this is one of the reasons for the sacking, because if those three teams are pulling a gap, then it means, you've got to be in serious trouble if the three promoted teams finish above you at this moment in time.
But why hire him? Like that all makes sense. I fully understand that, but like, why hire him?
Well, his
Like,
style of play, Ange's style of play is very attacking. They have more of the ball under Ange, but of course that with that style of play also means you're going to concede more goals. I think they conceded 18 and scored only 7. So that is poor. That is poor. But I think it becomes obviously the Greek connection's there as well. But I think it was just that, he was available and it made sense to do it. However, as you can see, if it would have gone well, we would have called it a masterstroke, but it's not gone very well. So it's been a bit of a disaster, meaning that they're now probably 8 games behind where they ideally want to be.
yeah, and before we talk about the potential new appointment, I kind of want to talk about the players, right? Specifically Morgan Gibbs-White on the verge of a big move to Spurs in the summer, was kept to stay because of X, Y, and Z, gun to the head maybe. But now we look at him, he's obviously been forced or been, you know, persuaded to stay, let's say. Nuno, great relationship, club going in the right direction. Suddenly Nuno makes a comment about the owner and weeks later he's sacked. Then they bring in another manager who is then sacked after 8 games. This cannot be good in any way, shape, or form for any professional footballer. It just absolutely baffles my mind. How, like, what do you think? Like, what do the players think? The players have just lost to Chelsea. They've missed some big chances in the first half. Didn't put in a terrible display, admittedly. On another day, 2 of those chances go in, and suddenly they could have got a result against us, right? And literally, before the guy's even done a team talk, before he's even done a post-match presser, he's sacked. Like, what? This has to have a negative impact on players to think, what on earth is going on at this football club? Why would I want to invest my time in a club and an owner that are just going to do this? So I think there's a massive hidden impact to this on the players and motivation and all the rest of it. Because it cannot be good for anyone.
I think the players, for the Ange sacking, I don't think that's going to change their opinion much, because I think they're all probably like a bit disheartened of Nuno being sacked. They probably knew what was going on. They probably knew he was going to get sacked through falling out with the owner, and sort of him making comments like that, sort of in his press conference before he got sacked. Nuno, this is. It's not a full on surprise. And if you're in the background, apart from the players, you're going to see that. So I think they're actually probably more upset about that part than Ange. Like Ange was there for 39 days. And in that time, we've had an international break where not all the players will be there. I don't think they're going to be too attached to Ange. They're going to see it's been sacked. And to be honest, it's going to be kind of, by the end of the season, we'll all kind of gone, oh yeah, Ange was manager of Forest. Because it's happened that quickly and gone. It doesn't matter how Forest do it, whether Forest go back up the table or actually get relegated. We'll probably just forget about this period of Ange being manager, and it'll be like a trivia question down the line, like how many days was Ange manager, and we would have forgotten, kind of thing. So I don't think that the players' mindset will be too bothered by it. It is more the Nuno one where you've got a manager who's actually done above expectations, and that's still not being quite good enough, and he's out the door. That's the problem, I think. And then players can say, well, what manager is going to do it enough? Do they have to go and win a treble? Do they have to do something absolutely extraordinary for him to stay? Or is it just going to be the owners had a bad week and gone, nah, I don't like you anymore, gone?
Well, with that owner, I think that sadly is the case, and that this is part of the problem, right? And again, I use Chelsea as an example because that's probably the closest thing. Them, us and Watford is probably the closest we've seen to it in these last years. At least it was a bit clearer under Abramovich's ownership, right? Win a trophy or fail. But the way Marinakis in the last couple of months has acted, coming on the pitch, having the disagreement, sitting there like a mafia boss at the top of the stadium, all of this stuff doesn't bode well for any manager. And again, obviously, it's part of I'd love to see the kind of the legal contract that people sign, that some of these managers sign around sackings and how the finance works. But the bottom line is, you're not safe. And I know some people say, "Oh, well, it puts you under pressure, so you're going to perform." But knowing you could be sacked if you don't win for 8 games, I don't think is a great environment for anyone.
Well,
So I,
that's just how the game works, isn't it? Like, no manager's safe from their job. If Pep Guardiola goes and loses 8 games in a row, he'd be under serious pressure, especially after the season last year. Um, I think I think managers will go regardless. At the end of the day, it's a chance to show who they are, show their mettle, show what they're worth. Marinakis is fine. He backs managers. Let's be fair, he does. He gave Nuno money. He gave Steve Cooper a lot of money as well to get them where they are, and he would have given Ange money in January as well, I'm sure. So whoever this new manager is going to be, which obviously we know is likely Dyche, is going to be no exception. He does back them. I can understand why he was upset when he walked on the pitch. We don't know what the true ins and outs of that were, but I understood why he was upset because they did have top four in their grasp, and regardless of not being expected to be there, they did slip up. You would be frustrated because that's a lot of money you're missing out on. Forest fans will tell you differently, but there is a bit of disappointment in the air. And it almost come to Europa League, wasn't it? If it wasn't for the Conference League, if it wasn't the for Palace not being able to enter it. So, you know, it has been a bit of a decline, even though they didn't expect it. But as Wenger says, once you've had a taste of caviar, it's very hard to go back to sausages. So I understand where he's coming from in some aspects. But any manager going into this job knows that this is not, this has to be a quick fix because Nottingham Forest are currently in the relegation zone.
yeah, I mean, let's look at then. Let's talk about, I guess, Dyche. Dyche is the leading candidate. Obviously, Roberto Mancini has been was come and gone, and that sounds mad saying in about 48 hours, but that seems like talks have either broken down or is not happening. My initial response to Dyche, and again, Forest fans watching, please do let us know in the comments your thoughts. Assuming he is put in the job, to me, my initial reaction is this is a massive step backwards. With all due respect to Dyche, what is his track record? It is, I'm going to manage very low teams in the league. I'm going to get them to survive. We're going to be defensively sound. That's it. This to me feels like an appointment that's going, keep us up, Sean. This doesn't feel like an appointment that goes, Sean Dyche is going to win the Europa League. And I hope I'm wrong if he's appointed, but Sean Dyche is not going to win a trophy. doesn't. And maybe this is his chance to turn the whole narrative around, but I don't see that happening.
Yeah, but to me, Sean Dyche, I don't think he's going to be this guy who's going to be here for 6, 7 years. You know, he's here for the here and now. They need to get out of this mess. You know, he's from Kettering Way, which isn't too far from Nottingham. He was a part of the club at the start of his career, so he's got a connection with the club. He talks very fondly of the area. So they've got something there where they've got a connection, manager and fans. That's important. Start with that. They got the building blocks. He's a safe pair of hands. You know, 10 years ago, I'm sure Marianakis would have been on the phone to Sam Allardyce. Obviously, that's not how it works anymore. He's now going for Sean Dyche because he is a safe pair of hands. Yes, towards the end of his tenure, it does seem that the teams he keeps in the table, in the league, do tend to fade off into relegation. Everton were a point above the drop zone. Burnley were near enough down. But for the next couple of years, he's probably what they need, just to steady a ship, have a bit of attention taken away from them in order to build them back up. You know, I think he's going to be a stopgap for somebody else. And that's not a bad thing on Dyche either. I think it's a very sensible move.
But what period? Like, what are we talking about?
As in what, how long he'll last or what he's for now.
Yeah, like, what is this for? Like, is this for the end of the season to keep him up? Like, do you know what I mean? I
Well, it
don't
depends how well he
understand.
does. If he takes Forest up into the top half, he'll stay next season, won't he? But at the moment, they need to be getting out of the drop zone and getting their act together in the Europa League, which from their 2 games that they've played, they're more than capable of competing. You know, his style of play isn't too dissimilar from Nuno Santos. If anything, it's going to be more direct. So Chris Wood should be, looking forward to actually finding some form, after the drop off he's had this season. So it's a sensible move that they probably should have gone for in the first place before looking at an overhaul in the summer for somebody else. I'm not saying he's there until the summer, but for now, he is the right choice in order to drift them out because it doesn't require open heart surgery. This team, it's not as bad as that.
I don't think it's a bad appointment. The only thing that I find weird about it is you pick Ange for kind of the attacking style football. You don't pick that for Sean Dyche. I think Forest are a better defensively side. Sort of, you saw it under Nuno. They were very good defensively. That was sort of one of their main aspects, and I think they will be defensively solid again under Dyche. But yeah, it's just sort of like you don't know what the owner wants. Does he want the reason bringing in Ange is you want attacking football. You want more excitement than say what a Nuno would bring than what Sean Dyche would bring. But now he's going back to Dyche. It's kind of, is he just admitting he was wrong and actually let's get something that's a bit more stable, or that's what I don't understand. But I think Dyche, is discredited a bit because I think at Burnley he did an absolute fantastic job. You know, he got them seventh in one league, like one season. Like, that's a great feat for Burnley. Like, Burnley aren't meant to be going to win an FA Cup, a Premier League, and whatnot. Forest aren't at the moment, and I don't expect it for some time to be challenging for the Premier Leagues. So the fact that he could get them to seventh, as shown by what he did at Burnley, shows he is I think he's still a very good manager. But yes, he's not going to bring in the trophies probably that. But I don't know who else would bring in the trophies at Forest. Nuno was probably their best chance because you've got one person who's clicked right. That's where I see it. So I think Dyche will shore up the defence. I actually think he did quite well at Everton with a bad hand because at Everton he couldn't do anything in the transfer market. And like Reece said, the owner does put money sort of on the table and spends it. He does, and that's a fair sort of point in his favour. So Dyche with a bit of money could actually progress them up the table. But now obviously he can't do anything until at least January. But I think he's going to be fine to do that. He's going to look at that in players, and defensively, like I said, I think it's a very good defensive team that will not lose as many games as what they did under Ange. I know Ange didn't win any, so you can only go up. Surely you can only surely go up. But yeah, it's an odd one on that. If we're talking about sort of like other candidates, sort of Mancini was mentioned, and obviously you said it's sort of come and gone. That would have been a recipe for disaster. Now, much as I love Mancini, and I'm hearing some bad reports about him possibly going to United if it goes all bad for Amorim, I hope that doesn't happen because he'll lose sort of a lot. It'll be a lot of hatred from City fans, including myself, if he goes to United. But he's not someone. He brings his own chaos as well. So to have that owner and Mancini under there, it could last less than 39 days because something would blow up. They would you'd hear about an assault happening at Forest because them two have got in a fight. Mancini had a fight on like there've been fights at City and it went quite well, when he won the league. So it could be a terrible signing in my opinion, even though I think he's a great manager.
I think Mancini is the sexier appointment, isn't he? He's the one who could handle the pressure at a club like Forest. However, I think he is better suited to the Man Uniteds, the Man Cities, the Inters, where there's that more pressure involved on him. I think his style of play, he's got the players there at Forest for it, but I also don't see, I don't think he's going to be cheap wage wise. Um, and I agree, he's quite a fiery character. I think Mancini's very similar to Ancelotti. He can work well at the bigger clubs. I think he thrives there. And also, when was he last in a relegation scrap as a manager? That'd be completely unknown territory to him, really. So, I think it was best that probably that wasn't the appointment at this moment in time.
Yeah, I mean, again, just going back to the point, yeah, your Dyche isn't a sexy appointment, right? I think some of the points you guys touched on, that Forest do have a good defense, right, on paper. So you combine that with Sean Dyche, I think they will become a team that are a shithouse team, very hard to beat, hard to break down, and they just lump it up top to Chris Wood. I think that can work. But if I was a Forest fan sitting here, that would not get me excited about the future of the club. That would feel like we're trying to maintain, we're going sideways, we're accepting we had a good season last season, and now we're just going to float around mid-table. That's for me. That's the impression this disappointment gives off.
But what
Either
what
that,
what's
either that
what's
or
wrong with
desperation.
what's wrong with that? I'm sorry, because it's the first time they've got in Europe for years. The next season, there's going to be a drop off because they overperformed. There's going to be a drop off. I think you just have to be
Yeah.
a bit realistic. I understand it's not sexy, it's not exciting, but they weren't even happy with Ange. I know Ange did win, but they weren't happy with his appointment. I understand Sean Dyche isn't the one that you want, but you've got to be realistic. You're not going to be fighting for Champions League spots again because you've got more games. Playing Europa means you've got more games. We saw it with Newcastle. They got Champions League for the first time in absolute years. They had a drop off the next season because there's a distraction. There's more games. There's expectation gone up, and I think people need to be realistic on what they can actually achieve year on year because it will go. It could go flat on their face, and they could get relegated this season. That's kind of how I see it. I think you have to be a bit realistic on what can be done, like what's possible and realistic, than expecting, oh, we came seventh this year, let's get fifth next year. When it's like you overperform one year, I just don't see it. And I thought if they got 10th, that's a good season for them. Have a go in the cups, 10th. It's good enough season.
Yeah, but I think with their squad, the amount of money the owner's willing to invest, the ceiling or the aim should be higher. I'm not saying, oh, let's go and finish fourth the next season, but the vibes this is giving off is we're happy with like 14th and we're happy with 14th. We're happy to have a run in the cup and then we'll reset. Forest for me felt like a club with a little bit of the history from back in the day as well, going, yeah, we can start to build this club and maybe become one of the bigger teams again. But for me, this feels like that's all just been thrown away in a matter of months. So I don't know. It's one of them. It's tough. Um, I guess the next question for us to answer is assuming Dyche comes in, where do we think this team can go this season? What is the ceiling? I feel like my answer is probably going to be more negative than your guys based on our conversation, but can they go and win in Europe?
I mean, they've got one of the better resources and better players to go and do that. Um, But I think it all depends on what their next 5 games are. If Sean Dyche is appointed in time, that starts with FC Porto, which is a very hard game, but it's at home. It's a winnable game. However, Porto are a very, very good side this season. Look at how well Moira's playing, the young Portuguese wonder kid for them. So no need to worry about the first game. However, it does look like it starts at Bournemouth away, which is a very winnable game, but it's not easy. Then it's at home to Man United. Again, not easy. You don't know what Man United team you're going to get, but it's a good chance for them to get a result. Then it's Sturm Graz in the Europa League, which even though Rangers sort of sniffed or laughed or disrespected Sturm Graz, this team have won the Austrian Bundesliga twice in a row, currently top of their league. They've overcome the Red Bull domination. They're not a small fry. They're not there to make up the numbers. They are a good side. I would argue that their big challenge is November 9th at home to Leeds, the Brian Clough derby. So I think that's their big, big game because Leeds aren't too far away from them in the table. By then, we don't know if Leeds will pull away from them or how well Forest will do, but that's a real big litmus test for them to build some foundation, get themselves going again.
Yeah, but of those next games, if you look, Porto at home, that's a massive game. Bournemouth away, Bournemouth are flying. United maybe in a bit of form. Sturm Graz away is tough. You're looking at those next kind of 5, 6 games and going, really, Leeds at home is the only winnable one. Then they've got Liverpool away. Then it's Malmo in the Europa League. That feels like a winnable game. But what is Sean Dyche going to come in and not win, and then we're just having the same conversation in eight? Do you know what I mean? Like, I just think this whole thing is just weird because I do genuinely think it's possible that for the next 8 games they could not win a game, and then what?
Well, he's sacked. Who's next?
That's what I'm saying. Like, this is just
No,
going
no,
to get
no. But
ridiculous.
I get your point. There are some difficult games, but like I said, I think Dyche there can. If you get a draw against United, I know it's at home. If you draw a decent performance, it's fine. It doesn't. Porto, like I said, like Reece was saying, Porto are a very good side. It's if they can't get a draw in that game, it's fine. It doesn't have to be full on wins against some of these bigger sort of teams or better teams. Really, it is when you play your Bournemouths. You can't go and get battered by Bournemouth. You can't go and get battered and beat by Leeds. But the other game, and then the other cup game that you mentioned, I've forgotten who it was. But they're big games for Dyche. But it's about performance levels, and I think Forest's performances weren't great under Ange. So the fact is, turn around some of the performances because that's what fans care about quite a lot. I know the result is what makes us happy, but if the performance is good and you lose, say 1-0, you go, you know what? We put in the effort. Sorry, it's like the start of the season when United played Arsenal. Arsenal won 1-0. United fans, I think, came out happier because of the performance levels. But what you're saying there, the ceiling I think Forest have, and I think it is a top 10 finish. I don't see them getting much higher than that because they've had such a poor start. But top 10, I think, is still a very good finish for them, really.
Yeah, I mean, I again, you look at the table, and at the end of the day, we're only 8 games in, right? So it's not. I don't genuinely believe they're in a relegation scrap yet. But I think, yeah, I think at this stage, could probably get 11th. I see him now finishing the bottom half with a Dyche appointment, doing okay, being better defensively, but finishing in the bottom half and then maybe having a bit of a cut run, but going out, in the quarters. And then where do they go? Then suddenly, yeah, I don't know. I just feel like the momentum's going to fall a bit flat, personally. Reese, what do you think?
I think a lot of us probably have Forest to finish around mid-table anyway, with the Europa League being factored in. And I think that's where they're more than capable of achieving. It's not the end of the world where they are. They can easily close that gap. The 5 games they've got are tough, but they're more than capable of doing it. Like I said, they're more than capable of nicking a 1-0 at Bournemouth on Saturday. So yeah, just take their time, win the games against the teams they need to win, and hopefully they get some bonus points at the likes of Man U, and along the way. So I think they're going to be just fine.
All right, well, that wraps us up. That's all we got time for. As always, like, comment, and subscribe. You know the drill.